Hi, welcome to Practice English 365. I'm Anna, and today we will practice English together. You will listen, repeat, and speak, just like in a real conversation. Our topic for today is travel. Now, let's begin. I still remember my first trip abroad. It was to Paris, the city of lights, the city I had dreamed about for so many years. The night before leaving, I couldn't sleep. My suitcase was open on the floor, my checklist in my hand. Passport? Yes. Tickets? Yes. Wallet? Yes. Camera? Yes. Clothes? Maybe too many. I checked everything again and again. My mom laughed. "Anna, you've checked 100 times. Try to rest." But I couldn't. My heart was racing, my mind already flying to France. The next morning, before sunrise, I left for the airport. The taxi ride was quiet, the city's streets still empty, but inside me there was noise, excitement, nerves, questions. At the airport, everything felt big and busy. Travelers rushed by, pulling heavy bags. Announcements echoed. I gave my passport at the counter and held my boarding pass tightly. It felt like a ticket to another world. When the plane finally took off, I pressed my face to the window. The city below grew smaller and smaller until clouds covered everything. I smiled. I was really flying to Paris. Hours later, the captain's voice said, "Welcome to Paris." My heart jumped. The train from the airport carried me into the city. Fields turned into houses, houses turned into tall buildings, and then there it was, the Eiffel Tower in the distance. Even far away, it was beautiful. At my hotel, I dropped my bag and ran outside. The air smelled of bread and coffee. I walked into a bakery, pointed at a croissant, and the woman behind the counter handed me one warm from the oven. I took a bite, buttery, soft, perfect. I laughed quietly. It was my first real Parisian croissant. That evening, I sat at a cafe terrace. People were talking, sipping coffee, reading newspapers. A waiter asked, "Un café?" I nodded. He placed a small cup in front of me. I sipped slowly, watching the world go by, and thought, I am here. I'm in Paris. The next day, I went to the Louvre Museum. The building itself was enormous, like a palace. Inside, endless halls filled with paintings and sculptures. I stopped in front of the Mona Lisa. She was smaller than I expected, but mysterious. Her smile seemed alive. Her eyes seemed to follow me. I stood there for a long time. Later, I walked along the Seine River. The water sparkled in the sun. Artists painted, musicians played, couples walked hand in hand. I stopped to listen to a man singing softly with his guitar. I didn't understand the French words, but I understood the feeling. One afternoon, I climbed the Eiffel Tower. The line was long, but I didn't mind. Step by step, I went up until finally I reached the top. I gasped. Paris stretched out in every direction. Rooftops, streets, the shining river. It felt endless. Another day, I visited a local market. The smell of cheese, bread, and flowers filled the air. Vendors called out cheerfully. I bought fruit, postcards, and a small keychain shaped like the Eiffel Tower. When I said, "Merci," the vendor smiled warmly. That little moment gave me confidence. But not everything was easy. One evening, I got lost. I turned down the wrong street and didn't know where I was. My heart beat fast. Then an old man noticed me. I showed him my hotel card. He smiled, pointed, and said, slowly, "Par ici." I followed his directions, and soon I was back on the right path. That night, I realized travel is about people as much as places. On my last night in Paris, I walked again to the Seine River. The sun was setting, the sky orange and pink. Streetlights reflected on the water. People sat along the banks, talking, laughing, playing guitar. I leaned on the railing, my feet tired, but my heart full. I whispered, "Thank you, Paris." The next morning, I packed my suitcase slowly. I didn't want to leave, but I knew one thing. Paris was only the beginning of my journey. When I arrived in Rome, I felt history everywhere. The city was alive with stories from the past. My first stop was the Colosseum. From the outside, it looked enormous, powerful, and timeless. Inside, I imagined gladiators fighting, crowds cheering, emperors watching. I walked slowly, touching the old stones, and whispered, "If walls could talk, what stories would they tell?" Later, I visited the Vatican. St. Peter's Basilica was breathtaking, with tall ceilings and golden light. I stepped into the Sistine Chapel and looked up at Michelangelo's ceiling. The colors, the figures, the details. It was overwhelming. For a moment, I forgot the world around me. Rome wasn't only about famous monuments. One afternoon, I wandered into a narrow street and got lost. But instead of fear, I felt curious. That's how I found a little shop selling handmade journals. The old shopkeeper smiled warmly and said, "Lost? Then you found me. That's good luck." I bought a journal, and he wrote my name on the first page. That journal became my most precious souvenir. And of course, the food was unforgettable. Thin crust pizza with fresh tomatoes, pasta full of flavor, sweet cold gelato in the hot sun. One waiter smiled proudly and said, "This is the real taste of Italy." I laughed and nodded. After Rome, I went to Venice. If Rome was history, Venice was a dream. There were no cars, only boats, canals instead of roads, gondolas gliding under bridges. I stepped into a gondola and the gondolier began to sing softly. The boat moved gently, the water reflecting the sky and old houses. I felt like I was inside a storybook. In San Marcos Square, pigeons filled the air. Children laughed, musicians played violins, tourists took photos. I turned slowly in the square, trying to remember everything. One evening, I bought gelato again and sat by the canal. The sunset painted the water gold and pink. The city glowed softly. I thought, Venice is not real. It is magic. Later, I traveled across the world to Japan. It was different, but just as beautiful. In Kyoto, I visited old temples, quiet gardens, and walked through a bamboo forest. Tall green stalks swayed in the wind, whispering softly. I even tried on a kimono. The fabric was heavy but elegant. I looked in the mirror, bowed gently, and smiled. Food in Japan was an adventure. Matcha tea, sushi that melted in my mouth, and ramen that warmed me on a cool night. Every dish was a story. One morning, I rode the Shinkansen, the bullet train. It was fast, smooth, and quiet. Out the window, Mount Fuji appeared. Tall, white, majestic. Everyone in the train gasped softly at the same time. Strangers shared one moment of awe. In Tokyo, life was bright and busy. I crossed Shibuya Crossing with hundreds of people. Somehow, no one touched anyone else. It felt like a dance. Lights flashed, shops buzzed, energy filled the streets. One evening, I got lost again. I stood on the sidewalk with my map, confused. A young woman approached me and asked, "Do you need help?" in English. I nodded. She smiled, walked me all the way to my hotel, and said, "Welcome to Japan." That kindness stayed with me longer than the neon lights. Japan taught me respect and patience. Venice taught me romance. Rome taught me history. Paris taught me courage. Each place gave me lessons I carry with me still. That's it for today's practice. Together, we traveled to Paris, Rome, Venice, and Japan. We prepared, explored, ate, got lost, received kindness, and learned. By shadowing this story, you improve your English naturally. You practice pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. And with the topic of travel, you gain vocabulary to share your own adventures and connect with people everywhere. If you liked today's video, type yes in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be here every day, walking with you on your English journey. See you tomorrow, right here on Practice English 365.